Okay, so last we saw, I had pulled the link bracer out of the bag and determined that it was too wet to work with. So I took it outside and I put it in the direct sunlight, and it's also kind of a windy day out here, and it's also really dry every day. So I put a timer on it, made sure I had a timer because if it's really easy to forget that you had something waiting out there, and it's really easy to overshoot in those conditions. So I went back outside after 18 minutes and found out that it was pretty much perfect and about to be too much. So I don't know if you can see it from there. Ah, yes, you can. Right here along the edges where it's considerably lighter is where it is drying out. And this level of dryness would be too dry to work with. I wouldn't want to try to stamp or carve on leather that was this dry. But fortunately, the link bracer has a very wide border where there's no stamping, so it's going to be pretty much perfect. And also, I found that I had in fact remembered to pack Lexel leather conditioner. This stuff is really nice, and it's really common too. You can buy it in the automotive section at Walmart because it's used for conditioning leather upholstery. I was hoping I had a brush that I could brush it on with, but I guess I'll just do it with my hands. And I really, really like this for applying to the surface of case leather before you start to work with it, because it does act like a lubricant. It makes your swivel knife drag a lot less. It cuts through a lot more cleanly. It makes your stamps burnish better. So, uh-oh, why does this not sound like a liquid? It's never been opened before, but I think this particular bottle dates back to the 70s. It's a long story why I've got this. This may be a different formula from what they're using today. Yeah, it smells very different. Okay. So, the ones you get in the automotive department are nice because they, got a little spray top. Let's deal with that. And I'm going to leave this in because this is part of the cautionary tale about using leatherworking products that can be easily knocked over. You'll find this with dyes more often than with leather conditioner, but it's just as easy. In fact, I'm going to mop it up with the leather because I needed to get some on my leather anyway. So, perfect, beautiful, look at that. But now I'm going to mop up the rest of it with paper towel. Yeah. Dyes, leather dyes, very liquidy leather conditioners, they tend to come in bottles that are very easy to knock over, especially the Angelus dyes. They're in skinny bottles like that. And if you move too fast, it is really easy to knock them over, which is why in my videos where I'm dyeing, you will always see the dye sitting actually in a coffee cup that's been sacrificed to the cause, because that you're not going to knock over as easily. So, yep, there we go. It is all covered in Lexol. That's beautiful. I am, however, going to toss my mouse pad in the sink to soak because that's not cool. Whatever, it was time to wash that mouse pad anyway, but this is also the time to point out that my cutting mat was on top of the marble slab that I use for tooling, and marble doesn't seem like it, but it's a very porous stone. So if you spill something on marble that is anything other than straight plain water, if you spill a dye or if you spill an oil, it's going to leave a stain on the marble. In this case, I seem to have dodged a bullet because it didn't actually get on the marble itself. But, okay, so after that little detour, that completely unrehearsed cautionary tale, we can get back to work. So, you put your Lexol on it and let it wait for a minute or so, which it got to do while I was cleaning up. And then you will take your pattern piece and trace it directly onto the leather with a stylus. So I just print off my pattern pieces on regular printer paper. Other people use tracing paper. Other people will have like a plastic cutout and they'll more like a stencil, and they'll trace around the inside. None of that's really necessary. The low budget approach works very well. So you'll have a stylus where you've just got a very fine rounded tip. Using a ballpoint pen works as well, but it will leave marks on your pattern and potentially bleed through and leave marks on your leather. So the stylus is the best way to go. And they're not expensive. You can pick them up at a dollar store probably. So if you're new to leatherworking, I really recommend that you tape your pattern piece onto the leather. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do just to show you guys. I have enough experience that if it's a small piece that I know I can handle, I won't do it. But the thing is, it has to stay in the exact same place for the entire duration that you're tracing, because if you do like some of the lines and then it shifts, you are never going to be able to get it lined up again perfectly. So for this pattern piece, what I do is I trace all this at the top with my stylus, and then I turn it around and trace these portions at the bottom, and then I take a ruler and connect the lines so that all of these lines here come out perfectly straight. And using the ruler also means that you can press harder when you're marking the line, and it lets your swivel knife actually kind of follow the groove that you've already made, so your swivel knife cut lines also tend to come out straighter. But yeah, for the purposes of this demonstration, I am going to tape it on. And I use just regular Scotch tape. Regular Scotch tape, however, does not stick to wet leather in the slightest. So I'm going to have to wrap it all the way around and stick it to itself. So you pick a spot where you won't need to see underneath it, really. So, I mean, technically that'd probably be right here. But actually, let's do it here. Because you're not going to be needing to peek at this section because you're not tracing that section. You're just going to fill that in with a ruler later. So center it. Center it as well as you can. And then wrap it under. And then take your other piece of tape and wrap it around so that it overlaps itself. All right, now this will be held on perfectly steady while I do all of my tracing. So this stylus has two ends, a larger end and a smaller end. I prefer the smaller end. And then you just trace the portions. So I tend to do all the lines that are going in the same direction at once because it saves you time having to turn your paper around less. Yeah, see, this is what I said about peeking. If you forget which lines you've done, you can glance underneath and see quite easily. And wet leather picks up indentations very easily, so don't have anything on your hands, especially on like this wrist, that is going to accidentally push down on the leather and leave marks, because once like these marks, they're not coming out. If I were tracing with my swivel knife and I went off one of these lines, you would still be able to see that line. Once it's on there, it's not coming off. So you do need to be quite careful to follow the lines carefully and to not leave any indentations that you don't want to. This is especially bad for me when I'm hammering, because when I get bored or tired or cold, sometimes I will miss the stamp and just hit the leather with the stamp. I'm like, oh God, did I really just? Yes, I really just. Paper patterns like this can't be used forever, not like the plastic stencils could be, because they are soaking up water, moisture, the entire time they're in contact with the wet leather. And they get progressively more worn out. And sooner or later you'll have to chuck them because your stylus will tear on the lines it's trying to draw. But these are easy to replace. And you can get a lot of mileage out of one piece of paper. I mean, if you're only doing one project, if you're not doing things in bulk like I do, then a paper pattern is just fine. and mark your holes. This is where you're going to rivet the straps on. And check to see that you didn't miss anything. Nope. Nope. Okay. So the tracing part with the stylus is done. Alright, so you'll notice there's a border on this that I did not bother to draw. That's because there is a very useful tool that does this better. It's this little guy. It's got one arm that's a guide that you put on the side of the leather, and it'll follow it along there. And then the other one is this little modeling head, I think that's what it's called, that you can use to indent where you need to. And I think, yeah, that's all. I get the right size. So you just push along like that, and it makes a line that is perfectly parallel to your edge. It's beautiful. It's not a must-have. Obviously, you could trace around there by hand, but most leatherworking tools that are not must-haves exist because they make a common job much faster and much cleaner. Like, it'll look better if you do it this way. Okay, so now to attach these little lines here. And actually, for this one, I find that using an awl. So what you'll do is line up, because I did mark where the lines start and end specifically, or where they start going down and where they start going up, rather than just trying to eyeball guess from where the line ended there, because your stylus is not terribly precise. So, yeah, this step, it feels very tidy. You do want to keep an eye on symmetry and make sure you haven't drifted into asymmetry, because that's one of the things that really brings down the quality of the work, is when you've got lines just kind of meeting up all mishmash. So there we have a beautifully traced link bracer.